I thought we might wait, if I may be so rude and seek your indulgence, wait a minute or two before we get started, just in case there's some other visitors coming on. Taylor, are you like a private interested citizen, or are you with an organisation?
So I actually am the executive director at the Canadian Energy Museum in Alberta, Canada. And we are looking at a similar project. So I'm really interested to hear, I guess, to your point, warts and all, how yours went.
Oh, wonderful. Well, greetings from down under. But particular welcome to Kayla Goodwin, who's contacted and joining us from Canada. Kayla mentioned that she's doing a similar project for her enterprise. So, Kayla, it's lovely to have you from so far away.
Thanks. It's 7 p.m. here, so on Friday.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, let's make a start. The presentation. I should introduce myself as the immediate general manager of the National Vietnam Veterans Museum. I'm in the process of retiring, and so in 4 weeks' time, I shall be still have a finger in the museum pie, but not as general manager. But I'm also part of the Totally Renewable Phillip Island group and head up the clean energy group that associated with that. The objective of the Totally Renewable Phillip Island is for Phillip Island to be totally carbon neutral by 2030. And interestingly enough, the government's recent announcement of their zero emissions program, under some duress, I hasten to add, is very, very pleasing to see. So what you're about to see today is very, very, in a number of ways, very current and very topical. So what we might do is make a start. So the process today will be to unpack, preferably for commercial enterprises, in regard to solar energy experience of the National Vietnam Veterans Museum, and the reason I say warts and all, because we did run across some issues in the process. So what we're going to look at is the pre-solar environment at the museum, a little bit of work on the power bills, our energy use, lighting, sodium versus LED, and some security issues.
Did the panels work yesterday when you had a power outage?
We've still got the power outage, and this is all part of the process, John. Firstly, we had a planned power outage on Wednesday.
That's correct.
We had a bit of notification about that, and then as parts of Phillip Island and Bass Coast were brought on stream, unfortunately, as at 9:20 this morning, we were still powerless. So it's very, very topical what we're about to discuss. So the program today will be a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation and get that through fairly quickly, and then hopefully some amount of time, 40 minutes, set aside for some questions and answers. So the content, as I mentioned, pre-solar environment, power bills, energy use, etc. The impact of planned and unplanned outages, very topical at the moment. In solar, the system and the cost, grant opportunities. In our experience, not all plain sailing, and a usage and a solar generation graph, and post-solar outcomes, average daily usage costs, average daily use, greenhouse gas emissions, actual energy costs, making sense of your power bills, and what next. And very, very topical, that sitting beneath a 30 kilowatt solar system at the museum in the dark with no power, and as such, we have no alternative but to close our museum. The other important question is to determine whether, in setting up your solar energy process, whether it's in front of the meter or behind the meter, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that, and battery investigation outcomes. So firstly, our pre-solar environment. The museum installed, I believe it's 130 solar panels on our roof of the museum at New Haven on Phillip Island, and the system was installed in February 2016. Up until power bills leading up to that point were fairly expensive, as you can imagine, and there was a thrust towards energy conservation. For example, with the lighting in the museum, we had a number of sodium lights, and of course there was a thrust to change over sodium lights to LED, which we had progressively done. And that was running at the same time as our solar energy program. Our museum is, for a whole range of reasons, security in our museum is fairly tight insofar as we have external lighting at night time, and we need those external lights for our security camera system. So our running costs, and of course our computers and so forth. So our running costs, whether we're closed or open, are not a significant difference. And you'll see that with the graph that'll come up shortly. The impact of planned and unplanned outages, and it's not as simple as it sounds, insofar as, for example, last Wednesday we had a planned power outage, and we were advised by AusNet that program was being undertaken, and so we had no alternative but to close our museum. And the museum was closed for that day. Now, Phillip Island, as you're probably aware, in COVID environment, until this weekend anyway, has not been full of tourists, and it's been pretty much local traffic until this weekend. And of course, the government announced on Thursday of restrictions being eased at 6 o'clock on Friday night, and that essentially enabled us to open up the museum. However, in the coming out of the planned outage, unfortunately, our computer server, for example, and our printer, etc., does not react well to coming back on stream after an outage, and so we had to call our computer people in to ensure that we were up and running and working as per normal. Unfortunately, our server controls all our front of house operations and our security operations and so on. So there was another half a day lost in getting our systems back up and running. And then, of course, we were operating as per normal on Thursday. And Kayla, for your information, we had a fairly significant storm event on Friday. That was Thursday night, very early Friday morning, wherein power lines trees were downed across power lines and so forth. And so we then had an unplanned outage from Friday morning that is continuing today. So in terms of losses, they're fairly significant. And it dawned on me, we had a similar event some 3 months ago, where a storm went through mainly southern Victoria and did significant damage. And at that time, I was sitting in the dark in my office underneath 130 odd solar panels in the dark, and a $30,000 Australian $30,000 investment. So I was a little bit ticked about that process, and so then we embarked upon the investigation of where we go from there. But our initial system, as I said, installed in February 2016, 115 solar panels, not 130. We had connected to a SunGrow inverter. That was the name of the inverter, and the cost was $30,000 Australian. It was funded in parts by grants, but importantly, it was in front of the meter. And so what was happening is that the power generation was going into the grid, and the power company, AusNet, through our distributor, Red Energy, were giving us 10 cents per kilowatt hour for our solar generation. We were then buying it back from Red Energy at a roughly 35 cents a kilowatt hour. So we were pumping it in at 10 cents, and it was costing us 35 cents to get it back again, which to us was just silly. As I said, it was not all plain sailing. The primary contractor that we contracted to put the solar system in then subcontracted the job, and it wasn't working to its design capacity. And so we investigated that, and it was found that there were, inverted commas, insufficient strings, close inverted commas, associated with the system. Now that all might as well speak Japanese to me, talking about insufficient strings, but in essence what it meant was that the system was not working to its capacity. And so that was repaired. Some time after that, we noticed the location of our inverter was in our if you like, an administrative store where we kept our office workings, paperwork, and so forth, and our computer server, and we generally kept the office, that part of the area, closed off with the door closed. And what would happen is that we noticed that there's a very, very small light on the inverter, a red light and a green light. And we noticed this red light on, but couldn't work out what it was all about. But we did notice that the power generation was negligible. And so we called out the company that installed it, and they sent out a tradesman to have a look at it. And he rather politely informed us that the circuit breakers for the solar system had welded to the buzz bar in the circuit board, the main power board for our museum. How the museum didn't burn down at the time beggars belief. As you can imagine, the temperatures increased to cause that must have been very, very significant. Anyway, we thought we fixed the problem. The circuit breakers were replaced, and the green run light was showing on our inverter. However, it transpires that in the inverter itself there was something like 5 or 6 fuses, and when the tradesman called out to fix the circuit breakers, didn't check the inverter to ensure that all the fuses were working. And as it transpired, there was only I think 2 or 3 working, which enabled enough for the system to tell us it was running as effectively as it should, but it certainly wasn't operating to capacity, and you'll see this in a graph that I'll produce shortly. But we didn't pick this up for some time, and in the meantime we were of course buying power at the top rate, and overall we thought that putting costings to it in terms of getting people out to try and find the problem cost us around about $8,000 in direct cost. So what we did in investigating this whole process was to obtain what we call the interval data from AusNet through our provider Red Energy, and the interval data was for in each day broken down into peak use, off-peak use, and solar energy use, and we consolidated that data into weekly allotments. So this graph that you're looking at, we started graphing data from the 1st of August 2016 through to the 28th of June 2021. And in it, following through, you'll see that the scaling on the left is kilowatt hours, and the scaling down the bottom is weeks. So week 1, the system installed in February of 2016, and working the way through. And you'll see that in about week 36, 35 that the circuit breakers failed in October of 2017. We got the guys out in week 43 to, we thought, partially resolve the issue, and you can see some improvement there in the system. But then in December 17, there was nowhere near the design capacity as appearing in the later 3 periods, years 2019, 2020 and 2021. The fuses failed in February of 2018, and then we realised that what the problem was and had that fixed in October 2018. Thereafter, from 1 week 115 onwards, you can see that the graph depicts the system working to its design capacity and the significant reduction in both peak and off-peak usage. And then as you go further to the right, you'll see that the effect of our museum closure during COVID and the differences weren't excessive, weren't extreme as a result of that. So what we did was to put together some post-solar outcomes, and these are just at random intervals and random electricity bills. So going from the left, obviously the date of the invoice. The ADUC is the average daily usage cost, and ADU is the average daily use in kilowatt hours. And the one on the right is the one on the right from memory, and I can't see it, but I think that's your greenhouse emissions taken directly from our bills. So as you can see, prior to the system being installed in February of 2016, our average daily usage cost was $39.46. Our average daily use in kilowatt hours, 129.23 kilowatt hours, and the greenhouse gas emissions at 14.49 tonne. So then, as I said, a random selection of dates, and you can see the dramatic difference in the average daily usage cost and the other two fields of investigation. Surprisingly enough, our bill of August of 2021 had an increase in the average daily usage cost to $27, and we're currently investigating that to find why that's why that situation and why the hefty increase, and the same with the average daily use. And although the greenhouse gas has not really exceeded at all, so there's something in the daily usage and average daily usage and the usage cost that we're investigating. So on that basis alone, the expenditure, and bearing in mind that over that period of time we had change in our lighting from the sodium, our bigger lights from sodium to LED, both internally and externally, for our security lights. So that was going to reduce the cost of energy usage, notwithstanding. So I did some more work yesterday, and unfortunately not on the figures, but if you want to see them, I'm only too happy to provide them for you. That for the period 25th of November 2019 through to the 21st of November 20, in other words, nearly a full year, the average daily usage cost was $8.48, and the average daily use kilowatt hours was 47.7 kilowatt hours. So you can see, and the greenhouse gas emission 4.715 tonne. So as on that figure alone, you can see a dramatic increase in the average daily usage cost. And if you do the arithmetic, you'll see that the payback of $30,000, I think from memory, was just less than 5 years. So not a bad return on the investment. The average so far from the 22nd of November 2020 through to the 8th of July 2021 is a little higher at daily usage cost, and the average daily use is higher, and we're looking into that process. But interestingly enough, the greenhouse gas emission is still remains quite low. So in our experience, the process of going to solar energy has certainly been very much an economic bonus for us. As I said, sitting underneath a 30 kilowatt solar system in the dark, no power, and we can't open the museum, and it costs us dearly. I mentioned last Wednesday's planned outage, and not only a loss of days trade, but the recovery after that. And the question was then raised in front of the meter or behind the meter, and I guess I asked the question, who stands the most to lose by the introduction of renewable energy? And it seems that both the government and the electricity generators are the ones that stand the most to lose. And our view is that, or my view is that, if we can construct and reinvigorate our system behind the meter, so that as the energy is produced, that we use it, and therefore not being so reliant on the grid, but recognising that we will have no choice but to be connected to the grid. But it certainly will be a very, very thorough investigation of behind the meter. We're currently looking at the investigation of battery installation, and the extent of energy required to open our museum with basic access to screens and interactive computer programs and so forth will then determine the size of the battery. And the three types of battery that we're looking at are lead acid, lithium ion, and nickel sodium chloride. The nickel sodium chloride at this point in time is our preferred direction on the basis that they are very, very low maintenance requisite and are totally recyclable. Whereas the other two have got obvious problems, and I don't know whether any one of you, sorry, Kaylee, you probably wouldn't have seen our reference, but there's been a couple of issues with lithium ion recently, and the other involved a Tesla vehicle. So our focus at this stage of the game is on a nickel sodium chloride battery, and all being well, we're not sure of the cost. We've received costing on the lithium ion at this point, and we've received 3 different quotes for 3 different quantities of energy that we wish to store, and we're currently taking a quote from an entity that provides the nickel sodium chloride. So that's where our museum sits today as we speak, convinced that solar energy is the way to go, and comfortable in the knowledge that it has returned our investment in less than 5 years. But there are some things that if anybody's going along this pathway or looking seriously at this pathway, there's a few things that you need to make sure that you tick off, and that starts at the very start of installation, making sure that the people that are installing your system are very, very qualified and more than appropriate to do so. So that's how we sit as we speak. At this juncture, I'd be very happy to answer any questions that any of you may have.
I do have questions, Phil, and I apologize if I sort of monopolize you a little bit here. So I guess my first question, and I apologize if you said this already, but you currently don't have a battery. So are you just selling back to Ozgen?
Yes, the situation here is that we are essentially selling all our solar generation to the grid, into the grid. The current rate is 10 cents a kilowatt hour, but I understand that's diminishing shortly, and we're buying it back at roughly 35 cents a kilowatt hour for peak use. So I'm not sure of the situation in where you are in Canada, but we have a scenario here at the museum whereby peak, where the majority of the energy use is absorbed, is between 7 a.m. and, don't quote me precisely on the times, but somewhere between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. And from 6 p.m. through to 5 a.m. is off-peak, and our weekend use is also regarded as off-peak. And then of course, the solar generation on top of that.
What, for the Vietnam Veterans Museum, I guess my question is, what prompted the original look into solar investment, and what did you put in your grants?
Yep, the main driver is cost. Clearly, if you have a look at our average daily usage cost for the period November 2019 through to 21st of November 2020, our average daily usage cost was $8.48. And if we go back to our average daily usage cost before the system was installed, which was on one of those earlier slides, it is significant. So
yeah, it is.
You just do the basic arithmetic, and it more than covers the cost. So the initial driver was certainly cost. And I guess that has now, it still remains our primary focus, but at the end of the day, it's also now looking at the broader picture of not only totally renewable Phillip Island, but our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, was under quite a bit of pressure in recent times to come up with a emissions policy, and has released that last week, and he's on his way to the Glasgow conference, where he'll be no doubt quizzed, I'd suggest fairly strongly, others about that. But it's in an environment now where, with the federal government saying that with a zero emissions policy by 2050, then there will be money available for enterprises to assist in that goal, and we think that there'll be a number of grants and opportunities presenting themselves to take advantage of that. And batteries and obviously solar power generation will be part of the mix. We're also seeing, interestingly enough, that a focus and a thrust upon green hydrogen, and seeing that is also part of the mix as well. And here I'm in offshore. There is currently a project called Star of the Sea, which is a beyond the horizon wind farm, essentially in Bass Strait. And so there is a mix of renewables coming together that hopefully will enable Phillip Island, totally renewable Phillip Island, to achieve its goals of carbon neutrality.
Phil, I've got a question. I live in Surf Beach, which is right next door to you. And
Yes.
I'm with Tango Electricity, and my rate is only 23 cents per kilowatt hour.
Excellent, well done.
So why are you paying 35?
Oh, it's a good question. It's just a process. That's who we are with at the moment. You remember the state government put out a recent advertisement about contacting a company that would seek out the best deals in energy procurement. And whilst the name of the company that you mentioned wasn't part of it, it came, and this query was probably undertaken close to 12 months ago, and the results that we were provided by that organisation indicated there was not much to be gained by changing retailer, and so we continued and have been a customer of Red Energy for quite some number of years. So I think, and it's not, I'm sure you guys have had a look at your energy bills, and it's not plain sailing by any stretch to understand them. And our Red Energy bill, for example, has some additional costs of summer peak and non-summer peak usage.
Correct. Yep.
Some additional costs on top of that, which we struggled to find why we were being charged, and in fact trying to find out what exactly was summer usage and non-summer usage rates. And we concluded that that was just an energy company's way of increasing their income.
You're right.
So maybe that's, John, another avenue that we can take to again probably shop around and see what we can do, get better rates.
The other thing is, when you're looking at batteries, what make of batteries were you looking at? What providers, like Tesla or?
Yeah, my understanding was the lithium ion was solar, and the nickel sodium chloride, and I'm not too sure of the manufacturers, but I'm sure if you Google nickel sodium chloride batteries, you'll see a number of manufacturers, and it makes for very interesting reading in terms of that particular type of battery and their environmentally friendly construction and recyclability.
Locally fabricated or overseas?
Don't know. Can't answer the question. I don't know. I'd like to think they were manufactured here. In fact, you and I might get together, John, and have a look at setting up a manufacturing.
Phil, I just have one last question for you, and then I will take you up and probably email you a couple things.
Sure.
In terms of your artifacts, do you find the reliance on the solar has any sort of negative impact on artifact storage or care, aside from obviously your power outages?
Yeah. Good question, Carla. The three main enemies of any museum are a combination of light, humidity and temperature. And if you get those in the wrong quantities, they can destroy your collection by the infiltration of mold, particularly in fabric and the like. And we can easily, in our current environment, perhaps I should explain, our museum is very, very young insofar as its genesis only goes back to 1996. And it's currently housed in a what is called a Bellman aircraft hangar, which is essentially a tin shed. So in that tin shed, we can control the light by simply putting covers over the windows, but we can't effectively and efficiently control temperature and humidity. And so the control element is putting the risk putting the collection at significant risk, and that's the primary reason why we're currently looking at building a new purpose-built museum from the ground up, very, very close to our existing site. But that's a $50 million Australian project, and well underway with that as we speak. So, if you like, our major issues at the moment are waiting on council the local council to give us a building permit to start construction, and then a small task to raise $50 million. But in my view, and I'm the supreme optimist, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
I think globally museums everywhere can recognize that challenge. So
Yes, yeah, very much so. Although, having said that, our Australian War Memorial up in Canberra has just been the recipient of $550 million Australian to renovate their memorial. Zoe, are you on deck?
I think that was a brilliant presentation. Thanks, Phil. I really enjoyed it, even though I'm very familiar with the museum, of course. So thank you for your time.
The next question I've got is, when will the new museum be open, or anticipated?
We're optimistic that as soon as the council give us the application permit, which we're expecting by the end of this year, we like to think within 5 years the museum will be operating.
Oh, very good. What are you going to do with the planes? You going to fly them over or drag them over?
No, we have no choice at this stage. We will probably drag the planes over, but we're optimistic about driving the tank over, and the armoured personnel carrier. That's our primary goal. We're currently in the process of getting our tank, getting it mechanically conditioned to do exactly that. And when we get our F4 Phantom jet, we might talk to the airport about seeing if we can land on that.
Thanks, Phil. That was fantastic. And thank you, everyone, for attending as well.
It's well done, Phil. Really well done.